Thing is for certain, the reaction is pouring in from every angle. Have a listen.
There was no obstruction and none whatsoever. And it was a complete and total exoneration.
President Trump is wrong. This report does not amount to a so-called total exoneration.
And that report needs to be made public ASAP so we can evaluate the body of evidence on the issue of conspiracy and look at why Bob Mueller decided not to indict.
The very people who for 2 years have been accusing Donald Trump of treason, who have accused him of working with Vladimir Putin, would themselves be the ones responsible for giving Vladimir Putin his greatest victory over American democracy.
It's a good day for America that this is resolved. It's a good day for the country. It's a good day for the president. But we did have 2 years of this, which took a lot of time and a lot of attention away from other things that could be accomplished.
I want the whole damn report. Because nobody, especially this president, is above the law.
The American people have a right to know whether their president is a crook.
Democrats have tried to use it to delegitimize this president. They have lied to the American public. Chairman Schiff and Chairman Nadler have said that there were going to be charges of collusion. The Democrats owe the president an apology.
We will hear from White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders in just a moment. But first, Doug McKelway, live at the Justice Department this morning. Doug, what can we expect today?
Well, probably not a lot happening here at the Department of Justice. We do know that Attorney General Barr has left home for the morning. He is en route to work as we speak right now. But the process of scrubbing the Mueller report has now begun. I'm told it could take some time. And keep in mind that it involves secret grand jury testimony. And for everybody who has been indicted or who was found guilty or who copped a plea deal with the federal government, there are many, many more people who were completely exonerated in grand jury proceedings. And they need to be protected. They need to be legally protected, and that's why the scrubbing of the Mueller report needs to happen. The action today, as you hinted, will likely be on Capitol Hill, where Democrats want this report to be released in full. They are honing in on Barr's letter that found Barr and Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, quote, have concluded that the evidence developed during the special counsel's investigation is not sufficient to establish that this president committed an obstruction of justice offense. Here's House Judiciary Committee Chairman Gerald Nadler.
We will ask the Attorney General to testify before the House Judiciary Committee. We will demand the release of the full report. The American people are entitled to a full accounting of the president's misconduct referenced by the special counsel.
And the White House is pushing back really hard on this. They're not just content with the president being exonerated at this point in time. It appears that they want a little bit of revenge here. Here's Kellyanne Conway.
Then you have Adam Schiff. Talk about an oxymoron. This man heads the Intelligence Committee in the House. He said, quote, he believed that the scandal was of a size and a scope probably bigger than Watergate and that there's plenty of evidence of collusion. He ought to resign today.
Republicans want this full report released as well, and they are reminding Democrats to be careful of what you wish for. They are of the belief that if this thing were to be examined truly in full, it would lead back to the Obama administration, to a highly politicized Justice Department, to the Clinton campaign, to Fusion GPS, the Perkins Coie law firm, and on and on. Sandra, back to you.
Doug McKelway outside the DOJ. Thank you.
Take a look at the numbers from the Mueller report now. The special counsel lasting 675 days. That's 1 year, 10 months, and 6 days in time. 500 search warrants issued, some 500 witnesses interviewed. Mueller's team employed 19 lawyers and 40 FBI agents. The investigation to date cost $25 million.
And here's what you need to know about Attorney General William Barr, who will determine how much of Robert Mueller's report will actually be made public. Barr served as Attorney General under President George H.W. Bush. He was confirmed by the Senate back in February to serve as President Trump's Attorney General. He has a long working relationship with Special Counsel Robert Mueller. Barr telling lawmakers during his confirmation process that he is committed to transparency and that he would not allow the White House to edit Mueller's report.
For the reaction now from the White House, Press Secretary Sarah Sanders joins me now from the North Lawn. And Sarah, good morning to you and welcome back on what has turned out to be a rather significant Monday morning. I want to go through a number of things that I've heard from Democrats in a moment here, but first what the president said was, talked about an illegal takedown that failed. When will we hear from him today, Sarah?
The president's got a number of meetings today, and we'll see if some of those open up where he decides to address the press directly. Again, he did so twice yesterday, and I wouldn't be surprised if he does that again today.
Okay, so we'll wait on that. With regard to releasing the full report, is the White House opposed to that, yes or no?
Again, as the president has said, he wants full transparency in this process. We absolutely know and have said for over 2.5 years there was no collusion. Now Bob Mueller is also saying the same thing. But that decision's up to the Attorney General, and the president is leaving it up to him at this point in time.
You wouldn't object to it, though. That's what I'm hearing from your answer. Yes.
Again, we want to make sure that I think some of the biggest things that we have to look at is that we're protecting the office of the president. And it's not just about this president, but it's about the future as well, and making sure things like executive privilege and sources and methods and things like that are protected. And that's why the Attorney General will look at this and make the best decision, not just for this president, but this Attorney General is going to make the best decision for America, and he's going to make the best decision for the office of the president.
Okay, did the AG Bill Barr, did he confer with the White House on his summary before it went to the Hill?
No, there was not a discussion about details and like a negotiation process of any type between the White House and the Department of Justice.
Did you see it
we got the
before?
information about the same time that Congress received the letter the White House was given,
so about
the notification.
About 3:40 in the afternoon on Sunday then. What is the president's reaction to this obstruction, non-collusion? Conclusion, I should say, the obstruction thing.
Be careful, that's a tough one to say.
I get it. Yeah, what's the reaction of the president on that bottom line from Bill Barr?
The bottom line is exactly what we've said it was for 2.5 years. There was no collusion. There was no obstruction. And frankly, I think the Democrats need to be really careful here. So far, what they're doing and what they're saying, they should be embarrassed by. They have said for 2 years, they have repeatedly and breathlessly attacked the president and perpetuated this malicious lie that the president was some sort of foreign agent and working with the Russian government in order to win the election, when really all of the interference between Russia and the election took place under the Obama administration. Let's not forget that Clapper and Comey and Brennan were the ones leading the intelligence community when these things took place, and that Obama was the president at that time. They knew about it. They did nothing to stop it, and I think they need to be very careful about pushing too far down that road.
Is it your hunch then that the answers to everything you're raising right now will be satisfied in this Inspector General's report that could be out in May or June, 2 or 3 months from now?
I think everything should be satisfied in the report that just took place. Bob Mueller spent 2 years, as you put those numbers up earlier, 2,800 subpoenas, over 500 witnesses, millions and millions of pages of documents were given to the Mueller team, $25 million wasted in taxpayer dollars to tell us what we've been saying for 2 years. This didn't take place. There was no collusion. The president won and is sitting in the building behind me today because he was a better candidate. He had a better message. He had a better vision for our country, and he outworked his opponent. They have failed at every single step of the way to defeat this president, and they've done it again. And this time they did it at the sake of the American people by putting them through this outrageous process, by wasting their money and making this such a big part of everyday life for Democrats in the media, when they should be focusing on the economy and ISIS and everything else.
The next leg in the story is why so many people chose to believe the dossier in the first place.
Because they wanted to, Bill. It's real simple. They wanted to. They didn't want to believe that Donald Trump had defeated them. They didn't want to believe their own failure. But this report further confirms what we all knew in November of 2016. Donald Trump won, and he won decisively, he won fairly, and he won because he was better.
But my question is, will the IG conclude that? That's what we're trying to figure out in the next leg of the story.
I don't know how anybody could come to any other conclusion.
To believe it. All right, another question here. You're hearing from Democrats a lot. Mueller concluded that Russia tried repeatedly to interfere with our election, but nobody took the bait. And that was one of the conclusions from the Mueller report yesterday, what Bill Barr put out. What has the administration ordered to protect the integrity of the next election 18 or so months from now, Sarah?
If you'll remember, Bill, not too long ago, we had a number of senior administration officials come to the briefing room and walk through in detail how we're taking a whole of government approach, DOD, DHS, DOJ, all of the intelligence community working hand in glove to make sure that what happened in 2016 doesn't continue to happen. And we're looking at and working with all of the state and local officials and making sure that we do everything we can to try to prevent this. Unlike the previous administration, we're actually taking steps to prevent this from happening again, and we're very hopeful in that process, and we're going to continue to work across the board with all of the departments and agencies to make sure it doesn't.
And when will we hear more about that, Sarah?
Again, Department of Homeland Security is one of the leads on this entire whole of government approach. I would certainly encourage you to talk to them, but I'd also encourage you to go back and look at the briefing. I think your network covered it, but a lot of networks did not on the day it took place. They spent about 30 minutes walking through in detail all of the different steps that the Trump administration is doing to protect and uphold the integrity of our elections.
Last point here. James Comey sent out a tweet yesterday, looked like he was in a redwood forest, and his message was so many questions as he looked up in the skies above him. Lindsey Graham responded to that saying, could not agree more. See you soon. When do we hear from James Comey next, Sarah?
Look, I think that Lindsey Graham said it best. See you soon. He was one of the people that failed to do his job. He lied throughout the process. He leaked information that should never have been public. James Comey has been a disgrace to the FBI. Thankfully, this president has stepped in. He took James Comey out of that position and has been working with Director Wray to make sure we don't have similar instances. I think he's got a lot of explaining to do. And if Congress wants to call anybody up to the Hill, he should be one of the very first, followed by his friends Clapper and Brennan. And if they want to look at what really happened and what the failures of 2016 were, they need to look inside of the Obama administration, because that's where they took place.
Hope to see you soon. Sarah Sanders, thank you for your time.
Absolutely. Always great to be with you guys.
Thank you. All right, Sanders.
We've got a packed lineup for you this morning. Andy McCarthy, Congressman John Ratcliffe, former DNC Chair Donna Brazile, and Trey Gowdy all joining us in the next few hours. Both sides of the aisle worked up this morning. We're going to hear from all those folks shortly.
Israel will respond with all the necessary means. We're fed up with Hamas. Enough is enough.
Benjamin Netanyahu fed up following a rocket attack in Israel that's now forcing him to cut his visit to Washington short. Israeli ambassador to the UN, Danny Danon, will be here to react.
Also, Sandra Storm
started with our coverage of Robert Mueller's report. Much more to come right here on America's Newsroom. Stay tuned.
There was a rocket attack overnight in Israel injuring 7 people. Fired from the Gaza Strip, hit a home in central Israel. President Trump today welcomes Benjamin Netanyahu to the White House, and we should see that in our program today. I want to bring an Israeli ambassador to the UN, Danny Danon, who is also in Washington. Sir, welcome back to our program. Netanyahu is going home early, cutting that White House visit short. In the meantime, this rocket landed quite close to a place where you call home. What do we need to understand about this growing conflict now, sir?
Good morning, Bill. Unfortunately, we see the aggression of Hamas hitting Israel again. Again, they're targeting civilian.
Sir, what did you make of that statement that he made, and how concerned are you about a possible fractured relationship between Israel and the United States?
We welcome the bipartisan support. We saw it in the conference in AIPAC here in D.C., and we saw leaders from both parties standing with Israel. We appreciate it. And if you have individuals who support anti-Semitism from both parties, you have to exclude them. You have to denounce them. You have to isolate them. And eventually you will have to remove them from public office. But I believe that the voters will be smart enough to decide about that. We see what happened in London when you have an anti-Semite leading a party today in the parliament in the UK. I believe it is not the case here in the US.
Danny Danon, thank you for your time, sir. We're going to watch that visit today at the White House, and we'll see what each respective leader has to say about the relationship. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Bill.
20 past, Sam.
Meanwhile, more trouble along our southern border, where authorities are having trouble housing all the Central American migrants trying to enter our country. Why vacation and victory, those are the words coming out of the White House at this hour, as top Republicans say their next bet will be behind finding why the entire investigation was even started in the first place.
Findings come back and they say what? No more indictments coming, no sealed indictments, no collusion, no obstruction. This is as strong a statement as you can see. This is good for the president. More importantly, it's good for the country.
There are parents.
Adam Schiff and Jerry Nadler are the same people that are going to try to switch the narrative and say, oh, well, this is not an exoneration. I can tell you it's a total vindication of the president, but it's not just for the president. It is indeed for the American people who trusted this president, who voted for him, and that now can say to the mainstream media, you know, why have you lied to us for 2 years?
So that's more reaction. You had the House Oversight Committee members Jim Jordan and Mark Meadows reacting to AG Bill Barr's summary report, saying it's good for President Trump and good for the United States. I think in the spirit of March Madness, you could say it was nearly a slam dunk based on the report that we got yesterday. And we were sitting here yesterday waiting for it. For about 3 hours. Didn't happen, but as soon as Hemmer and Smith said goodbye, well, we got word that it was coming out. It kind of works that way, doesn't it?
Sometimes it does, but both of them making the case it's time to move on. This should be the end of this story. You look at the active tweeting out there, and social media is still on fire with all of this, and reaction continues to pour in, but they make the case to move on. Democrats say they have more questions, many of them. So we'll see. Now on to this. New problems at our southern border, where communities are trying to cope with a wave of Central American immigrants being released from federal custody. Detention centers are full, and now more. William.
Sandra, remember, critics dismissed calls for more border security just last month, saying apprehensions were at, quote, historic lows. Well, it wasn't true then, and it isn't now. The Border Patrol is on track to apprehend 100,000 migrants in March alone. Most are released in days. This church in Phoenix takes in 1,000 immigrants a week. They get clothes, a shower, food, and help getting a bus or plane ticket to live elsewhere till their court date, which could be 3 or 4 years away. Now, in the last 3 months, ICE released more than 100,000 families, often at bus stations, as government shelters are full, and court rulings require families be released after no more than 3 weeks. Out of 49,000 beds, ICE only has 3,000 for families. So nonprofit shelters like this step in so migrants don't live on the street.
We take care of them here in the church because if they release these people in the bus station without a cell phone, without communication, they can be a victim of crimes.
ICE agents who typically arrest criminal aliens in cities are now being sent to the border to help. Now, critics want to eliminate ICE and most detention beds altogether, but others contend the U.S. is unintentionally making matters worse, encouraging more illegal immigration by rewarding those who come with freedom.
Just about family units crossing the border, and people think it's, you know, a victimless crime that these family units are coming for a better life. The criminal cartels in Mexico control the northern border of Mexico.
So the American Bar Association warned last week that the immigration courts are at unprecedented levels, 760,000 pending cases. It is, in their words, Sandra, on the brink of collapse. Back to you.
All right, William Lajeunesse in Los Angeles, thank you.
Now we get to the next phase in the college cheating scam as a dozen defendants in the admissions bribery case make their initial appearance in court. We'll get a live report from Boston, let you know what's happening on that front today.
Plus, the Mueller report making waves in the 2020 campaign trail. So will the no collusion results hurt their chances for the White House? We're going to ask former DNC chair Ed Rendell next.
This was an illegal takedown that failed. And hopefully somebody's going to be looking at the other side.
All right, a quick check at the markets here on this Monday morning, down 26 points out of the gate. Not much of a sell-off, but opening to the downside after the Dow sold off on Friday. You'll remember falling 460 points. It was a big sell-off ahead of the weekend. There was concern about what's going to get done or not get done when it comes to trade. Markets continue to be very sensitive to that and react to that.
I don't remember Friday.
You know what? It's nice to have you back, Heather. I hope you had a great week off.
Thank you, Smitty. Sure did. 9:31 now. Here we go. President Trump claiming victory after the Mueller report clearing his campaign of collusion with Russia. And many, including the Democratic hopefuls on the trail, are calling for the entire report to be made public. Former DNC Chair Ed Rendell standing by with analysis. Talk to Ed in a moment here. But first, we've got Peter Doocy live on the Hill there in Washington. Let's start with you, Peter. Good morning.
Good morning, Bill. Don't expect every Democrat to delete mentions of Russian collusion from their stump speeches because Beto O'Rourke was asked if it's time to move past the Mueller investigation, and he said no.
Our democracy was attacked in a way that we haven't seen in the 243 years that we've had a democracy. Attacked by a foreign power, and I think we've got to see if it was also attacked from within by somebody who sought to assume power.
But Mayor Pete Buttigieg doesn't think it's smart for people hoping to unseat Trump in 2020 to count on a special counsel to help much.
I think this is further evidence that it would be a mistake for Democrats to think that the way for the Trump presidency to end is by way of investigation. That could, of course, happen, but we've got to be paying attention to the kinds of conditions that made it possible for somebody like him to get here in the first place.
Just minutes after the Attorney General's summary of the Mueller report dropped, Bernie Sanders took the stage at a huge California campaign rally, and he called for something that every Democratic candidate wants.
What I know is that it is a summary of the report. Well, I don't want a summary of the report. I want the whole damn report. Because nobody, especially this president, is above the law.
So while Democrats try to keep the focus on the Mueller report, the Trump campaign is trying to move on to the economy because that's where the campaign manager Brad Parscale says most of the president's attention has been all along. Bill.
That was a big crowd. He was in Northern California, Bernie was?
Yeah, he went all up the coast, San Diego, L.A., and
impressive stuff.
San Fran,
right.
thousands at each, yep.
California goes early this year, too, as you know. Thank you, Peter. Nice to see you in Washington.
Sam. Meanwhile, the Trump 2020 campaign wasting no time putting out a new ad slamming Democrats for a collusion hoax. Take a look.
The evidence is pretty clear that there was collusion between the Trump campaign and the Russians.
I think there's plenty of evidence of collusion or conspiracy in plain sight.
We saw strong evidence of collusion.
Well, we know there was collusion with people in the campaign.
Let's bring in former DNC Chairman Ed Rendell. Ed, thank you for being here this morning. You go back to the tape and you see how many times we heard prominent Democrats talking about actual evidence of collusion. The report is out. Robert Mueller couldn't find any. Would you like to see more of an acknowledgement from your own party as to the results of this investigation?
Well, I do think we all need to read the report first. I mean, the president, in his usual style, made some statements which weren't true. He said the report totally exonerated him. It did exonerate him on any evidence of collusion, but it specifically said, and his own attorney general said, it did not exonerate him on obstruction of justice. That has to be looked at by people who are going to look at the report and decide what to do with it. So the question is, what should we do as Democrats? We should continue to do investigations when appropriate, but we should focus our attention now on legislating.
In this case, was the investigation appropriate, Ed?
Oh, yeah. 7 courts, 7 federal judges, including one who was appointed by President Trump, all ruled that the investigation was proper and legal. So there's no question about that. The president was dead wrong about that as well.
Kimberly Strassel penned a piece in the Wall Street Journal this morning. Mueller is done. Now probe the real scandal. Americans deserve a full accounting of the missteps of Comey and the FBI. In that piece, she writes, it's a searing indictment of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. You know, looking back, do you think that there needs to be a look back and an investigation as to how this initially started?
Well, let me say this. I don't know how she knows what's in the report because nobody's seen the full report. And I think we should withhold judgment on that issue until we've seen the whole report. But look, everyone doubted that Mueller was going to be fair. The president kept saying witch hunt, witch hunt, witch hunt. But I knew from Mueller's reputation that he would be fair. And the fact that no evidence exists to prove something doesn't necessarily mean it didn't happen. It means that no evidence exists to prove it. So the Democrats should not have made the statement that there was plenty of evidence of collusion. There wasn't. It was at the margins at best. Now we should put that behind us and focus on investigating other things that need investigation. But most important, on legislating. We need to pass out of the Democratic House an infrastructure bill to get people back to work and to do something about the absolutely pathetic state of our infrastructure. Immigration.
It sounds like you're making the case to move on. It sounds like you're making the case to move on. And what you just heard from the White House was that this should be end of story. 2 years, $25 million later, that this should be the end of that story. I want to ask you about what is happening for 2020, because this certainly will play a big part in what happens there. Here's the latest Fox News polling on what we're seeing so far with Democratic nominees, the preference among Democratic primary voters. Biden, although not even in the race yet, topping the list. Sanders moving up. You saw the crowds there that he had a moment ago, 23%. Harris and O'Rourke round that out at 8%. I know that you have said that at one time this would be a slam dunk for Democrats to beat the president. You've moved on for that. What changed?
Well, our party started making unforced errors. The day after the 2018 election, if we'd held the presidential election that day, President Trump would have gotten drummed out of office. Remember, Democrats got 9 million more votes for Congress in the 2018 election than Republicans did. That's 3 times what President Trump lost the popular vote by in 2016. Then we started making unforced errors. We started talking about getting rid of ICE. We started talking about the Green New Deal. We started talking about Medicare for all without talking about how we're going to pay for it. So we started to make unforced errors. We started, some of our new members started criticizing, making comments about the Middle East.
I hear you talking about
all those things.
And I wonder then if you could just tie this and bring this all full circle then, looking at 2020 and Democrats' chances now that this report is out, Ed. And here's Brad Parscale. I want to end with this because we haven't shown this yet. Here is what the president's campaign manager is saying as a result of this report. So distraught and blindsided by the results of the 2016 elections, Democrats lied to the American people continually, hoping to undo the legitimate election of President Trump. Their dirty tricks have not ended. Even today, Democrats have picked up the disgraceful mantle of investigating, obstructing, and destroying the will of the American people at any cost. They failed once and they will fail again. I wonder if you could finally, Ed, just tell us what are the lessons learned here and what have Democrats learned as a result of this process and how things will change when it comes to 2020?
Well, first of all, I wouldn't, if I were a Republican, say that President Trump is out of the woods. This was just one of many, many different places that are investigating President Trump. For example, on the campaign finance violations with his lawyer, paying off the women. That's a clear violation of federal law.
That's beyond the scope of the Mueller investigation. They were looking for collusion. Go ahead.
Right. But we're talking about other investigations that are ongoing, which could be just as damaging. But that's number one. But number two, yes, it's time for us. We can continue looking at certain things which should be looked at, but we have to get back to doing the business of the people. And that's legislating on infrastructure, immigration, fixing the Affordable Care Act, things like that. That will be the key to whether we'll be successful in 2020.
All right. Ed Rendell, great to have you on America's Newsroom this morning. Thank you. All right, more on the Mueller report fallout and its impact on the 2020 race with former DNC chairwoman Donna Brazile. She will be joining us live at 10:40 a.m. Eastern Time, just a short time from now.
A lot to come, a lot more to scare. Top seed NCAA tournament late on Sunday. Watch what happened.
Out to Taylor. Jones is on him. Taylor driving in, banks it up. No, put back, in and out. And Duke survives.
I mean, wow. Duke in Central Florida, that tip right there might have won the game and destroyed a ton of brackets all across America. Duke survived 77-76 over the Knights on Sunday. Duke now heads to the Sweet 16 where they'll play their ACC rival Florida State, which will be another great game coming up here. So the madness is around us, Smitty.
I feel the energy from you.
Hashtag Zion had 32 yesterday.
It was an exciting
Just saying,
game, sure.
good stuff.
Yeah. All right, on to this Fox News alert on a Monday. A complete and total vindication of the president. That's the word from President Trump's legal team to the Mueller report. Summary was released. Rudy Giuliani is calling on Democrats who went too far in their attacks on the president to apologize. Here's what he said this morning on Fox and Friends.
Would think they'd have the decency to say, I was wrong, I made a mistake. Even if they want to move on now to this other stuff they're going to look at and just embarrass themselves, at least stop and say, I was wrong. They should also be happy for the country. There's no high crime, there's no low crime, and there's no misdemeanor. And remember, this report was signed off on in the name of not just Attorney General Barr, but Deputy Attorney General Rosenstein, who's been into this case from the very beginning and appointed Mueller, and by the Office of Legal Counsel of the Justice Department.
So that was the reaction from Rudy Giuliani.
Very interesting interview this morning, too. Maybe we'll talk to Rudy a bit later today, too. In the meantime, we got this news from overseas now. Fox News alert now. The last territory ISIS held in Syria has now been liberated. U.S.-backed Syrian forces apparently now successful. It is a historic military accomplishment that brought together the largest coalition in history, but the fight against Daesh and violent extremism is far from over. Retired four-star General Jack Keane, chairman of the Institute Study of War, Fox News senior strategic analyst. How you doing, sir? And good morning to you today.
Good morning, Bill.
I think you would agree with that statement right there. The battle is not over, but this battle apparently has been won in Syria.
Yeah, and hats off to everybody from the United States and our coalition partners, and particularly the Syrian Democratic Forces, for what they were able to achieve after 4+ hard years here. And the Trump administration, Bill, deserves a lot of credit because they accelerated the pace of this operation, they changed the rules of engagement, and they put more military capacity on the ground to kind of get the results that we have now.
You were arguing 4 years ago you could get.
But it will not require all the people that it has been in the past.
Well stated. What's going on with Chairman Kim in North Korea? Apparently there's some sanctions that were put on and pulled off. There was confusion over the weekend. Sarah Sanders said this. She said President Trump likes Chairman Kim. He doesn't think these sanctions will be necessary. Apparently there were additional sanctions that will not happen. Read between the lines, sir, and tell us what you think is up.
Well, Kim came home empty-handed, and he's got hardliners at home. They really thought that they would come back with some sanction relief, particularly the tough UN resolution sanctions. That didn't happen. So what is he doing now? He's trying to gain leverage again. He's saying, I may not go back into negotiations, but the truth is he will, because it's in his national interest. He's saying, I may conduct missile testing again, or maybe even nuclear testing. I think that's also a hollow threat. I think he knows if he does that, then he's returning the entire negotiations to a crisis mode that we were in 18 months ago. So I think it's unlikely he would do something like that. Where the Trump administration is, I think they're doing exactly what they should be doing. They are going to sanction China, who has opened the aperture and is using their shipping companies to transfer oil at sea to Korean vessels. That's got to stop. We should also go after Russia. And I think what the President was saying there's some other sanctions that have been planned that he's going to hold in abeyance to see where Kim is moving. So we're in a pre-negotiation stage here, I think. We're filling each other out. I believe the North Koreans will come back to the negotiating table because they've got to get these economic sanctions off their back.
Thank you, General. More to come on this, okay? It is a process. I think you'd be the first one to admit that. Jack Keane in Washington. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, good talking to you, Bill.
Operation Varsity Blues heading to court today in the college admissions scandal that stunned the entire country. We're live at the federal court in Boston.
Also, our headliner today, Texas Republican John Ratcliffe is live. Why he's going after James Comey in light of the Mueller report from Sunday.
Jim Comey doesn't care. My reaction was Jim Comey cared enough about the special counsel's conclusions that he created the special counsel. Now the special counsel doesn't come up with the findings that Jim Comey wants, and he wants everyone to know that he doesn't care anymore.